Today we're going to update my list of the best open field marches in Rise of Kingdoms based on my recent experience battling in KVK, technically 2 of them, using Belisarius Prime. And although he is really good, he's certainly not as good as I thought he would be. He's still pretty damn strong, so let's make our updates to the list of the best marches in the game, and I'll include timestamps. So if you care about a specific troop type, you can jump to that. A certain number of marches, you can jump to that. Or even the talents for the marches. And before I dive into all of that, allow me to take a moment to thank the sponsor of today's video. Today's video is sponsored by the Amazon App Store, and they've got a city building war game that I think you might want to check out. It's called Rise of the Kings. As you know, I like to check out lots of different city building war games to see which ones have features I really enjoy. And Rise of the Kings has a crazy discount with the Amazon App Store. To get this, you need to use my link in the description of this video. It'll take you to the discount page that you see on screen now. From there, you'll scroll on down and it'll tell you about the discounts, but the first thing you need to do is download the Amazon App Store. From there, you'll download Rise of the Kings, and you can now use Amazon coins in Rise of the Kings. I've actually purchased Amazon coins in the past, and you typically save between 3 to 10% on your purchase of Amazon coins, but also there's a crazy deal going on now where you can get an additional 20% back on your purchases in Rise of the Kings. I mean, can you imagine a combined 30% of value? That's an upwards of 10% on your purchases of coins, and then 20% back when you make purchases in games. All of that is amazing. I've actually purchased hundreds of dollars worth of Amazon coins in the past for other games that I've played, so you might also consider downloading the Amazon App Store to see what other games are in there that you're already playing that take Amazon coins. This particular 20% back offer is a limited time offer for Rise of the Kings, and it is limited to certain regions, so be sure to check the offer details screen to see if it's available in your region. Thank you again to the Amazon App Store for sponsoring this video, and again, you'll find everything you need in the description, including the link to the discount page. The first thing we need to do is establish 3 really good marches. So if you're a newer player to Rise of Kingdoms, what should you be doing? And the simple answer here is 1 army of every troop type. This is because it's a good idea to be building equipment, 1 set for each troop type anyways, but also you'll be getting armaments with inscriptions, and chances are you'll get an even distribution of each troop type. So because of the formation system, you will want 1 army for each troop type. Now, I think probably the strongest march in the game, single march in the game, probably ends up being Skippy, and then you pair with Liu Che. I feel like if there's any one march you're gonna work on, that is really, really, really good. Now, if you're just getting the Season of Conquest, of course, you could make the argument that you'll use Liu Che with Alexander the Great instead, and that you already started working on Alexander the Great earlier. But for the purpose of this video, we'll show the Skippy and the Liu Che as our best march, I think, in the game. From there, we do need to talk about archers because they are very, very powerful, and we need to include Zhuge Liang and Hermann Prime. That combo is so strong. Obviously, you want to build toward this combo, and both of them feel like very long-lasting investments in the game, especially if you follow the strategy I'll share with you in a bit, and we'll get there. The next march, I think for cavalry, you still want to use Nevsky and Joan. I worry about Nevsky. Like, he's getting old, bro. Like, when is the guy gonna get retired? But Nevsky and Joan work really well together. Now, many of you have seen me flip this around and use Joan with Nevsky, and this is because my homie Cortex did a ton of testing, and I thought he was going to make a video sort of releasing a bunch of information about that and talking about it. I think he planned to, but he's a busy guy. He's got stuff he's doing. So his testing showed that for group fights, the Joan Prime is probably the better pick, but it is more popular, certainly, to use the Nevsky as the primary, and from a DPS standpoint, it might be higher. The Joan primary brings you the support tree, which is good damage mitigation. Regardless, if you're making 3 marches in Rise of Kingdoms, these are the 3 to aspire to at this moment in time, which brings us to then what, Cheesy? And the thing you want to do is, I think, add another cavalry march. Now look, you could make an argument to add 2 cavalry marches, but if you're adding 1 cavalry march, then I would recommend Huo paired with either you use Belisarius Prime, which in some ways, because he's a more recent commander, feels like a safer sort of investment than William. But your other perfectly fine option, especially if you've already got it, is to just use the William. So Huo with Belly or Huo with William is going to work very well. Both of those marches, I mean, look, the buffs from William on his 4th skill are just very powerful. Even though you don't yet have 5 marches, you'll get there. And I think if you're adding 1 more march, it probably ought to be infantry. And if you're going to do infantry, then what you do is you put Guan in the mix, you put Skippy with him, and you use Alex with Liu Che. Alternatively, we know that Gorgo is very good. We know that Sargon is very good. Lots of great options here to pair with Liu Che. And this is probably the best 5 marches you could muster. However, you could easily make an argument that, you know what, I really want to do 2 archers, not 2 infantry, and I would understand it. Infantry have just been really weird for a long time. So if that's what you wanted to do, you're going to keep that Skippy Liu Che combo. Forget about the Guan. Guan is old. Like, do you really want to start investing in Guan now? That is kind of sus. You'd probably be using Boudica Prime and Ashurbanipal if you wanted like a really great additional archer march. Alternatively, if you had Isong, you could be using that. I have used Honda. You could use Nebu, who... Hold up, let me just grab him from my list of candidates. All right, like I was saying, you could use Nebu. Like, if you wanted to use 2 archer marches, I would be totally for it. Now, here's the thing, though. We know that for Ark of Osiris, the meta is 1 infantry, 1 archer, 2 cavalry at least, maybe a 3rd cavalry march, but 1 march ultimately ends up filling garrisons anyways, or rallies anyways. So, for most people, the strategy of 1 inf, 1 archer, and 2 cavalry is a very important foundation, and I just want to establish that before we get to the next part here, which is what if you've got 6 marches, Chisgule? And if you're going to go to 6 marches, then certainly you're going to hang on to this archer march that we've got here. I'm pretty happy with the Boudica with Ash, okay? And you would not break up the Zhuge Liang with Hermann Prime. That march, you just let it cook, okay? From here, you can either bring in the infantry or you can bring in the cavalry. Now, I am inclined to believe that the stronger play of the things we could do here is to use the Guan and Skippy because the Guan silence is still just very powerful, and to go with Liu Che with Alex. And I think that ends up being really good. You could maybe use Sargon, you could maybe use Gorgo here. And then when you go to a 7th march, I think it's pretty obvious that you want to bring in cavalry. So at this point, for our 6 marches, we've established a 2-2-2 situation. 2 armies of each troop type, which will make sense because your armaments, if evenly distributed, will give you that distribution roughly. I mean, some people will get more lucky or less lucky, but if we go to a 7th march, I think it's cavalry. And what I have been advised, checking in with my boy Chadsky, who actually does this, is if you want to run another cavalry march, you're going to use Justinian, and you're going to take the Belly Prime, and you're going to drop it there. And that is probably one of the best 7 march combos you could cook up. Now, of course, there are other things you could do, like if you really wanted to stick with Trajan, you could do that. I use Trajan with Skippy, I use Guan with Sargon, and I go to some lengths to make the leadership talented infantry gear that I'm married to work for me, okay? But most people shouldn't do that, and you certainly should not be investing in Trajan now. So if we unwind that silliness and stick to something a little more classic, if you aren't going 3 cavalry, you could consider going 3 archers. And if you're doing 3 archers, you have several options. One is, of course, Nebu with Isong. A little bit squishy, though, okay? The safer-ish option would be to bring in Henry, and you can do Henry with Nebu, Henry with Isong. A lot of great ways that you could run that, all right? And that archer combination looks really good. Now, there are several marches that are still worth talking about that are on the bench here. For example, we left XY on the bench. I think you could pretty easily be using XY instead of Justinian, but a part of what Justinian brings is some defensive stats. And so I think that's why you're pairing it in part with the Belly Prime. But a lot of people don't have Justinian. They might have an XY to use here, so you got options for what you do with those cavalry. In addition, I mean, I mentioned, Tariq ibn Ziyad Ligi's here, but I'm not really using him at all these days. Theoretically, you could drop him into one of these armies, but I just don't think there's a 3rd infantry march that I'm really excited about at this moment in time. And I'm the infantry guy. I want there to be more infantry. Maybe you could find a way to do it, but we're really reaching compared to the quality I think you get from other things. And maybe we've got some new infantry on the way soon. Subscribe to see if that actually happens, because if it does, I'll be covering it. But let's jump in game now and talk about talents if you're using all these different commanders. First, let's blast through some infantry talents, starting with the Skippy Prime. If you're going to be using him, this is the slam dunk build that you go for. 2 points into Rejuvenate because of the way that rage capping works and the maximum amount of rage you can get per turn. Max out your emergency protection. Avoid getting elite soldiers because you'd rather have strong of body. Now, theoretically, you could move a few points around if you wanted the march speed manipulation. Instead of having march speed yourself, I prefer to have the march speed. This is the build I use on my Skippy Prime. If you are using Liu Che as the primary, then this is the slam dunk build that you go for. Very much the same structure up top in the infantry tree, and just a distribution of points in the attack tree to take advantage of the normal attack damage that you're dealing. This is pretty uncontroversial, these recommendations that we're doing here, although I will highlight one more time that the reason you're skipping elite soldiers, even though it should be the thing you are excited to get at the end of the talent tree, is that it is giving you 1.5% of stats distributed across attack, defense, and health per talent point. This is giving you 2% of stats per talent point, and it's health, which you just would prefer. So yeah, you go with this strong of body. You do not dodge that to get elite soldiers. Okay, so if you're newer to the game and you're getting value, consider subscribing. From here, Juan, if you are using him as a primary, I feel like Rage, people are really understanding why it's so important now. This is the build I've been using. Feral Nature, to fire off your active skill more frequently. Don't be afraid of the extra rage. Embrace it. Embrace your rage, okay? From here, we do take a little bit of march speed and also hold the line for full infantry build for damage reduction, and strong of body, of course, because that is absolutely insane. Not taking it would actually be the thing that would be insane. From there, let's talk about archers. And you've got some really, I think, uncontroversial talent builds here. I think it's pretty well understood at this point that the skill tree is what you use for the open field, and the archer tree is what you use for rallying. Okay, now in that situation, for Zhuge Liang, you want to get Feral Nature. From there, you want to get Venomous Sting. I like the Rage on Razor Sharp. You could avoid it if you wanted to. And then I do something over here where I put 1 point into the normal attack damage, and I bring my way over to full quiver for 3 talent points. Zhuge Liang talent build, pretty uncontroversial. You could go with an archer build that looks more like this. This is more for rallying than it is for open field. However, in my opinion, the Rage is better. And there we go. Feral Nature is the way I'd run that. Now, if you are using a support tree archer as the primary, there are things that you can do here, and we should talk about that. So let me just actually get one of those. If you're using Henry as the primary, or for some reason you're using Herman Prime, you would put 2 points into Rejuvenate, as we talked about, 3 points into Emergency Protection, and then just go to the top of the tree for the Whistling Arrows. That's pretty simple, isn't it? So that's the way you would run a support tree if you wanted to run a support tree with your archers. This brings us to Cavalry, which also are uncontroversial. This is the build you use. You go for the full skill tree. I feel like a broken record. It's the open field. Use the skill tree. From there, you want to get Emblazoned Shield. I think that it's important to do Halberd extra damage to archers when you see them, and I take Undying Fury for the extra rage. GG easy, very, very simple build. You use the same build on your Huo, okay? You're pretty much using the same build everywhere you go, unless you are going to use a Joan as the primary. Now, if you are going to use the Joan, 2 points into Rejuvenate from the support tree. I have 2 points into Emergency Protection. You could argue for the third. What I've done here is I've actually moved in on full strength disarm. I'm going for the debuff because I'm going to swarm garrisons. Debuffing the garrison seems pretty good. Whenever this commander's troop launches a basic attack, 10% chance to reduce the target's attack by 20% for 2 seconds. Cooldown is 3 seconds. So that's what I've done. You could carve off a point here and put it into Emergency Protection. That'd be better for the open field. This is arguably better for swarming. It's neither here nor there. They are about the same in their function, all right? There are some things that you'll have to take my word for it that are not very good. I took William to level 60 and maxed out his star level. I used him as the primary. It was terrible. Okay, attack tree on William. You need skill cycles. You're not getting rage restoration here. It's no good. For the same reason, I wouldn't recommend Belisarius Prime unless you're going to hunt gatherers, and I'm not making a build for that here. If you want to see that and want to see a video about the fastest movement speed you can muster in the game, it'll be in the end screen in just a minute for that video. Now, if you're someone like me who maxed Trajan ages ago and you're stuck to him because you made this gear and talented it, leadership, GG, with no way out, consider doing something like this for your talent build. I currently have 5 talent points in Cage of Thorns. You could relocate those if you want. From there, 4 points into Strategic Prowess, and getting these points off to the side, Armed to the Teeth and Armored to the Teeth are pretty sweet, but you do need to have mixed troops to actually activate that, so make sure you've got your full 3 troop types represented. And yeah, when you lose the 3 troop types, it kind of sucks. You get pretty wrecked. This March trade's the worst of everything I've got, for sure. Trajan with Skippy, it just doesn't hold up anymore, and I don't know what to do with this infantry leadership stuff other than, well, I mean, I don't know. It's the last thing I'm going to work on, okay? And maybe if I'm lucky, I will be saved with the release of a new commander that could use this gear, but I guess we'll see. If you enjoyed this video, throw a like on here, consider subscribing. A big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, the Amazon App Store. Definitely check the link in the description for more information, especially if you're spending in mobile games. If there are games you're spending in the Amazon App Store, you could save some pretty big bucks. It's worth checking it out just to see. Until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom.